Seated. Good morning, saints. Good morning, sinners. So a lot of you remembered that I told you today's sermon was going to have props. You remembered better than I did. So here we are. We've got some props for us today. But these props, I need some volunteers with, all right? It's a little bit of a contest this morning, okay? Some of you have seen me do this example before, but it's a good day to do it too. I need 2 volunteers who will blow a balloon in such a way that it will fill this entire jar. I don't want any air pockets in these at all right? All right, Carter, man, you raised your hand. I have great belief in you. So blow a balloon in such a way inside of that jar it will fill. Oh, Mr. Andrew, thanks so much for making eye contact with me. If you will, blow that balloon in such a way that it fills that entire jar. I don't want to see any pockets of air in there. I don't want to see any space. I want to see entirely just a balloon. And when you get it as far as you think you can get it, tie it off. We will compare, and the winner gets to have a free breakfast on me in the fellowship hall, all right? I want to recap for us the story that we just heard, this Easter story, according to Matthew's version. He has the women waking up very early in the morning on that Resurrection Sunday. Except for them, it wasn't Resurrection Sunday. It was still, for them, a continuation of Good Friday. They were filled with sorrow. They were filled with grief. They had a lot of despair. This whole movement that they were a part of had just collapsed on them with the death of Jesus. And they didn't know anything else to do but to go and see the place where they had laid him. And so they walked there early in the morning. When they get there, an amazing thing happens, an incredible thing happens. A big earthquake rolls this giant stone away from the tomb. Now, the stone had been placed there by the Roman guards because there was a conspiracy theory that the disciples would come and steal Jesus' body and then begin to spread this rumor that Jesus had been resurrected. So this big stone is in front of that tomb, except the earthquake had rolled it away. And this angel shows up in a flash of lightning with clothes in dazzling white and sitting on that stone like a big stone's going to bother me, just kind of in triumph. And that guard is scared to death. They don't know what to make of everything. And the women are there, and they are scared as well. But that big angel on top of that big stone looks at those women and says, "Do not be afraid. He is risen, just as I have told you. Go to visit the brothers, go to visit the disciples, spread this good news." And so they immediately leave. But on their way there, they see Jesus, who says, "Greetings." We could translate it here in North Texas as howdy. He meets them on the way. Howdy, y'all. He sees the women. They fall down. Their tears of sadness now become tears of joy. They grab his feet. They hug on him. They begin to worship him, and all is right with the world. And Jesus gives them the first evangelical mission and message. Go back to my brothers and tell them this good news. I don't know why it took the church 1,900 years to allow women to become preachers when on the first day, in the first hours, they had the first sermon. He is risen. And they go and they tell the disciples that great news. And everything changes, not only for them, but for all of our world. Let me check in back now with our contestants here. Let me see how things are going. Andrew, that's pretty good. You did a lot better than I imagined you would do on that. I didn't have much hope for you. Carter, man, you're still going. Whoa, look at you. All right, Carter gets a free coffee today and those things. Tie that off. I only need one of these for the rest of my sermon here. What's the deal with the mason jars and the balloons and trying to get all that air out of these things here? You are like the balloon. And when you're born into this jar. It is the system. We call this the human condition. You're born right into it. And this human condition is surrounded on all sides by sin. It traps you and it contains you. And no matter how hard you try, you can't live life outside of this jar. You can do a lot of things, but you're never going to get outside of this. It is the human condition, which means that we're human. We're not born like Superman, can jump over buildings, shoot lasers out of his eyes. That's not us. We're humans. We're born into this jar. And over the course of our lives, we begin to experience different things that go to work on our jars and keep us contained and keep us trapped and keep us located therein. One of those things that we experience in our life is shame. All right, Carter, man, thank you. That was pretty good. You got that balloon inside of there. One of those things that we experience is shame. Those other things that we experience are guilt, things that we've done wrong in our lives, and the feelings of that. Guilt and shame are a little bit different. Guilt is sorriness over what I've done, the action. Shame is sorriness over who I am. And it's a much deep-seated thing that takes a lot of root inside of our lives and really affects a lot of our behaviors and actions. But as we grow and we live and we have experiences in life, we can't help but experience these things. And as we do those things that break promises, that hurt us, we become filled with regret. And that gets attached to our jar. It becomes a stain, and it follows along with us. In times we have fear in our lives. Those women were fearful. They were experiencing something unknown. But we also experience the unknown. And a natural human response, because of our human condition is to become filled with fear. And then to begin to make our decisions based on fear. They're reactionary decisions. They're not thought out. They go to black and white. We don't use the higher functionings of our brains in these moments. They're very reactionary. But fear controls our lives. A lot of you, I know, live with worry over maybe employment options, over maybe what your children are doing recently, over maybe something that's happening to your parents who are aging, and what are you going to do with them, and how are you going to respond in those moments? You're filled with worry. And worry can tend to fill our lives. It fills it in such a way that it becomes anxiety. And anxiety can become a chronic condition that we live with, that we wake up with and we go to bed with, and it's there at every moment of our lives. And it gets attached to our jars. As try as hard as we might, we can't escape living outside of those jars. In times in life, I know some of you have faced addictions. We have these personalities because we're in this human condition where we get attached to things in our life in an unwholesome way. And those addictions take over our lives. They become the center of our lives. Many of us can name what some of those addictions are. Maybe you've seen people go through it. There's drugs, the illicit stuff, or even the prescription stuff that doctors give out to us that we begin to abuse. There's the drinking. I know several of you have had stories about your wrestling with the bottle and how you've been able to overcome it. But for you, it is a daily battle that you have to remind yourselves that you do have this addictive personality because you are in this jar and you have to do things to protect yourself. But drugs and drinking, those are just too big for people. A lot of us become addicted to our work, addicted to those phones on our hips and in our pockets, having to respond to every email and every ding and have to spend lots of hours staying up late at night just to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed for that latest deal or for what the next deal is. We become so focused on work that when we have any free time, we don't know what to do with ourselves. We become trapped in this ability, and trapped in this condition that we're in. Many of us, if you're alive, you live with a sense of selfishness. This is just a protection over who you are, always having to take care of yourself, looking out for yourself or those who are closest around you to make sure that you can survive in this kind of cutthroat world. All these things begin to go to work with us, and they become part of our jar. We become trapped in there. We become contained in there. We become part of what these labels are saying to us. Selfishness shows up in our lives in greed. I got to have more. I got to get more, and I will do whatever it is in order to get that. It shows up in jealousy. Jealousy has a couple of different responses in our life where we become fearful that we will lose what we have if someone comes around with something better, and then jealous becomes over the things that you have. Jealousy, when it becomes jealous over the things you have, turns to envy. I got to have what you have, and I got to get it now, and that consumes our lives. The two biggest things, though, that I think we live with the most are anger and then sadness. Anger is always a secondary response. Something's happened in our lives that has wounded us, and instead of addressing that need, we lash out in anger. We get vengeful, we get spiteful, we might even get violent. But when we look at the course of our lives, the course of how we were born, the course of everything that's going on inside of our jars, we see there's a lot happening. And when you look at this seriously, and you think about the questions that this poses seriously and where this all leads, we become filled with the last feeling that traps us in, and that is despair. We lose hope, and we start to wonder, where are we going in this life? Now, we can do a lot of things to try to clean our jar. We've become very good at these kind of our own rescue attempts. One of those things is to justify ourselves, and that's by hoping that if we can accomplish enough in life, if we can do enough of the right things, that then maybe somehow that accomplishment will begin to just kind of tear these labels off of us. But accomplishments, doing good works, it has a shelf life, and it doesn't last long enough to really respond to everything that's happening inside of our jars. So we can't justify ourselves enough to get rid of these labels. We can't try to save someone else. We pour our lives into someone else in such a way that we hope that maybe they will become enough of a great and wonderful individual that they'll rub off on me, and that will save me as well. But that's not fair to other people, to expect them to become your Savior, to expect them to provide your salvation. It's not something we should put on other people. And then there's the thing that I call accumulating our immortality symbols. These are those fancy things in life that we hope that their luster and their shine will rub off on us and will begin to kind of clean us as well. You know, you guys all know it's the fancy cars, it's the fancy houses, the poofed up spouses. It's all of that stuff that's out there. That if we think we can get enough of those around us together, that somehow it will take these labels off and we can begin to live the life that we know we were meant to live. We just can't do it. But that's the hope of Jesus. One of the things I think that attracts us so much to who Jesus is that he was the first one to come around and not live life within a jar. That's what made us so intrigued by him, which I wonder why people flocked to his feet all the time, why they bowed at his feet to listen to his teaching, why they asked for his healing, why they wanted to be around a table with him. It's because I think they experienced around him someone who wasn't living contained, someone who wasn't trapped by all of this stuff. And they wanted to get as close to that as possible because we knew this is who we were and we know where this leads. Jesus knew where this leads to. And we talked about that on Friday, with Good Friday. He saw how we were living. He saw the stain of our sin and the stain of these labels all attached to our lives. And out of great love, he didn't want us to suffer. So he does the imaginable. He crawls inside of your jar. He takes on your shame. He takes on your pain. He takes on your labels for you. And in that jar, he's buried. He dies. But is that enough? Did Jesus come by in our lives just to clean up our jars? Just to wash us a little bit freer? I don't think that's what resurrection is about. When Easter Sunday comes around, God has something more to say. He says, I'm tired of your jars. I'm tired of you living the way that you are. I'm tired of you being trapped into your labels. And so I say on Easter Sunday, no more jars. That's what resurrection is. This is Jesus bursting out of the tomb. This is Jesus saying, no more. You don't have to live that way. You don't have to live contained. You are now united with Christ. And as Colossians say, when Jesus, who is your life, is revealed, you will be living in glory. And that means no more jars, folks. We're not contained in there anymore. And we can begin to live life and imagine it outside of the jar. That's what the hope of Easter is. That's the thing that Jesus poses us today. You're not contained any longer. I've taken care of it all. I've buried it on the cross, and I've opened it up in the resurrection, in the new tomb. What are you going to do with it? How will you live? Set your things on things above, Colossians tells us. Jesus, who is your life, when he is revealed, you will live with him in glory. We rejoice today because the one who took our pain, took our shame, came back so that we can live anew. So live anew, church. No more jars, no more boundaries, no more labels. Amen.